will be nerding it up about tracking and evaluation today. My name is Andrew Hughes, and I am the president of Designing Digitally. And for about 16 years now, we have been developing custom training solutions, and oftentimes we have to prove ourselves. And what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what we've done to make that possible. And also, we're going to discuss some of the things that you guys can do for best practices. That way, life can be a little bit easier on you guys. Just a couple things before we start. We actually have some Q&A questions, the Q&A open. So if you have any questions for me, if you can hear me, go ahead and say hi and just let us know in the Q&A who you are and where you're from. And while you're doing that, just to give you an idea, we'll have some poll questions to ask. Those are anonymous, so any questions or feedback that you would like to give, you could always do it there too. Last but not least, there is a emoji and a hand icon on the left-hand side, in which you can raise your hand or give a reaction. And so just something to keep in mind that you guys can do during this experience to make life a little bit easier on you and a little bit more interactive for both of us. So today, uh, I want to start off by stating this. Designing Digitally does a lot of custom content development, but we also do a lot of really high-end training solutions. And I'm not actually here to talk about what we're doing or how cool we are. What I'm going to talk about, and the reason why I bring us up first, is because primarily we are looked at as an outside vendor, and we work with these large corporations, and a lot of times we have to do what's called a comparison between being a cost expense line item and an investment, and we have to provide a justification, whether we're proving that we're actually being an investment or we're just a line item in the expense side of the company's balance charts. So we need to make sure that we're actually able to do that tracking and measuring and make sure that we are being as effective as possible. So the first thing I have to say is welcome and thank you for actually taking a look and being able to divulge this hour with me so we can nerd it up. First and foremost, I apologize. I did have a webcam, but my 4-year-old son decided to dart across the room and ripped my my HDMI cable and my audio USB completely out of my laptop. So luckily, I still have one other HDMI port that actually worked. So we're able to do this today. But if you get a chance, if you have your cell phone, you can actually just take a picture of this real quick or just hold it up with your camera and on your phone, and it'll actually take you to my LinkedIn so we can connect and get nerdy, especially after this, because I'm always trying to post some interesting things. And like I said, I kind of justified what Designing Digitally does, but we do a lot of online learning for workforce development. We do quite a few analysis and really a lot of both business and training and learner performance and business performance consulting, developing full ecosystems. And one of the major things that we've really been doing is developing out a lot of XAPI solutions for companies, especially ones that really are under a microscope to determine on what is effective and what has not been effective. We ideally try to help each and every other company and organization that we work with, and we do our best to try to solve some of their external challenges. So one of the things that I'm asked a lot, I mean a lot from people, is things such as, how do I know that what we've done and what we've built training on, that they actually learned it? And for the longest time, as you guys know, we were like, well, they got a 7 out of 10 on their exam or the post assessment. or they improved from the pre-assessment to the post-assessment, so we can see that there was some knowledge transfer. But how do we really know? Okay, this is where that tracking, measurement, and evaluation really comes into depth. And I'm not talking just doing a needs analysis and then evaluating what you're doing for content. I'm talking about evaluating what is actually happening as if you were a teacher in a classroom and you could see these students, and by reading their face, looking over their shoulders, walking through the classroom, you can tell who needs more remedial training and help than others. We are missing that in online learning. And so we are now able to do that with tools such as XAPI, and we're going to be talking about that here in a minute. The one thing that I do want to make very clear is looking at a training evaluation, it's really a collection, what I consider to be discovery, a lot of curiosity. I really tell our instructional designers and our performance consultants to act like you're a 4-year-old. If any of you have a 4-year-old, and I don't mean walk in there and like slap somebody and then start crying because you don't have lunch, but what I do mean is if you have a 4-year-old, you understand that the word why comes out of your mouth, out of their mouth every 10 seconds after you. And if you've ever noticed, you'll respond to them for, I don't know, I respond to at least 4 whys before I realize what am I doing and why am I doing this. So one of the things I tell our staff is to make sure that you ask and act like a 4-year-old. Just continue to drill down on the why and the hows, and we'll talk about that too. The other thing that you have to take into consideration is you get a lot of feedback, and it really helps us with this new analytical tracking and what we can do. It helps us to make decisions about training. But one of the things that I am very excited about is the fact that this is actually going to allow us to not just track how well employees are doing, but it'll give us better insights on how we can help benchmark the company or the agency we work with so that we can show external influences along with whatever their business goals and KPIs are, and how we can tie them to what we've done and how we can actually show that we are improving the business. If we are able to improve, and I tell you this because this happens every single time, if Designing Digitally can walk in, build a training solution, develop it out, release it and support it with you guys with the use of XAPI, we're actually able to then turn around and have your cost justification. And every single time what I've seen is it allows you to fight for bigger budgets because executives and directors now see and are able to tangibly see what the value is in doing those types of training or even doing training at all. And we've had a lot less of that than let's say marketing and advertising and even HR, other aspects of HR. So one of the things I want to ask you, let's have a little poll question. And this is, there's no, this isn't based off of what you know, this is just what you think. What do you think the percentage of companies that do not attempt to measure employees' training effectiveness? What percentage of companies all over the world do you think are not even attempting to measure any employee training effectiveness? And I'll give us a minute, and I'll pretend that we're on Jeopardy or Sorry, I have little kids, so you're gonna get a lot of dad jokes and a lot of goofy sounds coming out of me. I like that you guys are voting. Keep that voting up. For all of you that didn't vote, this is the time where you have to click over the other tab and go, uh-oh, I'm supposed to do something interactive. For any of you guys that found that funny, you must have built online learning before. All right. I'm going to move on now. Here's actually the results, you guys. It looks like you guys think 60%. We have over 37% in here that think 60% or more. Believe it or not, as of right now, we're looking at 30% of the firms do not even attempt to measure at all. But additionally, from that 70% who do actually, 2/3 state they were not confident in the data and information that they have, and they're not confident that they're actually tracking the right metrics that align to the business goals. So what does that tell you? that tells you that people are really trying and really implementing analytical information about what's actually happening with inside of our online experiences. But at the same time, we also have this fear that we may not be tracking exactly what we need to. So, what I'm always asked the next time or the second time around is, how do I know if training is effective, and what KPIs do I track? The KPI one is something that I get asked right up the beginning. I may get somebody who says, "Hey, we need to do diversity and inclusion tracking," but can you show me any proof that you've made an effective increase on the diversity and inclusion impact here at the organization? And so there are times where we have to ask, well, how are you benchmarking it currently? And what we try to do is come in and really ask those a lot of hard questions. So things that what I want to hit today for you guys to understand is we're going to be hitting the value of that tracking. We're going to looking at proper KPIs. We're going to be looking at the training initiatives and what other people have done, and actually how we can evaluate this from its conception all the way to it's been launched a year afterwards. Okay, and then we'll be showing you some of what we've done from evaluation model to make that happen. Okay. So, what is in it for you guys? One of the things that we find is you properly measure this information, you're going to be able to figure out what employees need remedial training on exactly what is missing or what gaps you've had in the training that you've been able to do. You'll be able to look at that impact holistically. And we'll be talking about that. One of the ways that we do it to figure out some of the effectiveness is our competencies. When we build our objectives and competencies, we're not just going to click the articulate, track an XAPI and then just shove all statements of everything they do. We're going to be tracking by competencies, and we've aligned those with inside of the course in multiple different ways. And that way we can look at it from a holistic standpoint to say, out of this division of the employees, they do not understand positive affirmations or something of that nature. Another side that we're now under the microscope, especially for COVID, is the business performance side. As you guys know, when COVID hit, many organizations said, hold on, we don't even know who we're keeping. We don't really know what's happening. So trying to do these training strategies and pieces became it was already in a reactionary industry. It became just panic reactionary industry. And so what we have to do is we have to show that business performance impact, whether that's benchmarking with them outside of the training, determining on where we are with sales, where we are with productivity, where we are with if you're doing safety training, well, how many compliance issues have we actually had, so that we can help benchmark that going into it. And then one thing that we really find that it's killer for many organizations. I really see, especially with compliance training and some of the onboarding or even things like diversity inclusion that become just buy a default module, throw it up there into the LMS, tell everybody they have to take it, and then it collects pixel dust sitting in the LMS and just becomes dusty and never really gets touched again. What ends up happening is you don't really have a evolution of your communication strategy to those learners or up to the upcoming learners or to learners that take it later on. So in essence, you're outdating yourself by not even looking at resurfacing it each quarter and seeing what needs to be revised and updated. And so having that, you'll be able to having some of the XAPI material, you'll be able to even run more reports over how much loss, how was the drop off, so on and so forth. And then another thing we could do is really look at training accountability. XAPI can look at their entire plan and actually work with your systems to build a custom training plan, and we'll be able to take that into account and make that training accountable for them so that they understand what exactly needs to be done and what has been unlocked and provided to them based on this actual training experience that they're doing now. And I talked about that. One of the things that you really want to do is make sure that you're increasing the return on investment on what you're doing. Like I said, there's many processes on doing what's called a cost justification uh, compared to an investment. So it's an investment versus a cost justification, and those tools can help you tremendously. We'll get to some of that. Uh, so one of the things I really want to state is, what are the costs if you don't do this material? I can tell you, we've been in that situation for a long time. SCORM has been very effective for us, but SCORM was the bare minimum of what we needed from a grade book standpoint if we were an educator to tell us if we passed or not. That really does not help us on the business performance side. So some of the risks that we've seen from companies really not looking at this or even not evaluating training, they are some of the companies that usually have a large break in skill gaps. They do over time lose competitive advantage. They do understand or do not understand the misuse of the time and the energy by having people pulled off of the line to be able to just show them and walk them through it, which is still something that we need to do, but it could be diminished in time of taking that individual off that floor to limit that to ensure that the business actual income side of the company is still very, very effective and not being intruded. So other things, we're going to talk a little bit about, well, how do you identify some of those KPIs for tracking with individual or with companies? First, for all of you that may not know, a KPI is actually a key performance indicator. It's a status indication of anything that you may have done to try to beat a specific goal. Whether that's you want to say, I want to run a 7-minute mile, and you run an 8.5-minute mile, or if you're like me, more like a 10 to 12-minute mile. And what you do is that's your baseline. And then from there, we're going to set a realistic goal. In my opinion, most of the goal aspects that you're really looking at when it comes to KPIs is be humble and be realistic at the beginning. It's better to underwhelm your increase of your KPIs than to shoot for the moon and land back here on Earth after you burn up in the atmosphere. Business KPIs vary from each department, each business aspect. I can tell you we are very heavily KPI'd on our sales side. I can tell you how many calls, what they're doing, where they're on the pipeline, who they've talked to, how frequent that is, how many opportunities they have lined up. And I know that on a daily basis. And so there are sides of the division of the corporations and the agencies that have much of that information. And it really gives us the ability to do actionable strategies. It allows us to make uh, realistic goals and realistic understanding of what can and cannot be done, especially over a period of time. I find the more data that you get in over time, the more you can be realistic with your KPIs. Like to give you a realistic understanding of that is I have an understanding based on the prior history of what our KPIs are of winning proposals. And it's even broken down by government, by state, by corporation sizes. And over time, those KPIs are extremely important to me because it tells me who our customer is and how we're working to continue to help those types of organizations. So are there ways to standardize KPIs? Okay. One of the things I can tell you is they're not standardized across the board. So each KPI is really going to be relevant on the goal setting. A lot of the KPI material that I normally see comes from the director and the supervisory manager level, mostly from the middle level and executive level. The middle level management will be working with the supervisory to execute that with the employees, while middle is reporting that information to the executive side. So that hierarchy normally happens. And when that happens, those KPIs are just vastly different for many organizations. Luckily, we've been able to work with thousands of organizations, and during our tenure, we've seen KPIs for any different aspect, even if they're competing organizations, they're not the same. So one of the things that we like when I'm pitching or talking to an executive, one of the things that I normally provide them is the executive summary. And I know we've heard of that, but if we really understood what an executive summary is, that executive summary is just as quickly as possible, as blunt as possible, to give the information so that it can be reviewed, understood, and digested quickly. One of the things that we have now done is provided digital dashboards, especially with the viewers that we can see from the statements of XAPI. And those dashboards now are able to give you that information quickly and easily and effectively. And those have to be set up based on the KPIs that you have built, or in training terms, the learning objectives that you have set forth in that training side. And those learning objectives are actually tied to the challenge that needs to be resolved and or improved, and that challenge has those KPIs to it. So that's how everything is tied in. So it is great to be able to have the visual and charts and graphs rather than just raw data and providing them how many people passed, how many didn't. One of the hardest things is really to determine on what KPIs are you really going to be able to look at for these particular problems. The one thing that I can tell you is when you're working with the departments, they have strategic goals, long-term and short-term goals. You really want to make sure that you kind of have interviewed that department or that subset group to really figure out what theirs are, and also benchmark with them of where they are today. And while that can be tough, there are ways to do it. I have literally been on the phone and cold called our customers' employees so that I could drill down and find metrics in their production department, in their research and innovation department. And there are ways to do it. You just have to find out how you can extract it. And then, just like you do in instructional design all the time, we want to know who, what, when, why, where. And so we drill down when we're making cold calls to try to figure this stuff out if we don't have it from the training side. And we try to really divulge as much as possible so that we are making sure that we have a good baseline to go by. So I talked a little bit about this, but we really want to know who is actually involved in the KPIs and who's going to be managing the actual KPIs. What do they want to see based on this solution that we're going to be creating? Because that'll impact our actual learning outcomes. And then when we're actually looking at the results for this information. So 9 times out of 10, if you implement training with an organization, you have everyone take it at the exact same time, which rarely happens, you're going to want to look 90 days out and beyond to really see, has this actually over time been retained and how has it made an impact? So you need to know when you're actually going to be making those benchmarks with that department and when you'll be benchmarking it later on. And then you will want to look at sharing that data and making sure that those KPIs are tracked not just by you, but by that department or division or subset. And just make sure that you have clearly worked with them to identify it. It's got to quantify itself. It's got to qualify and quantify itself. And I'll give you an example. So I may ask some of the stakeholders this question. Are you going to be involved in the actual review and molding of this project? And if they say yes, then I may ask a quantitative question, ranking 1 to 10. How much effort or how much involvement do you anticipate having in this project, so that I can follow up and have the why and the quantitative data for that too. These KPIs can be on a team basis. They can be different than let's say, shipping KPIs or outsourcing. So, but you still have to make sure that you can quantify it. That is the most important. And making sure that those indicators have a measurable result, some way, shape, or form. You also have to take into consideration that you want to make sure that you know what other outside influences you will have. Because let's say you're doing sales training and you're trying to cross-sell training solutions, and they have you make a training plan and you train these employees, and then they have decided to completely shift everything that they're selling to these new model systems. And there's now not as much opportunity for cross selling because maybe it's an all in one device of some sort. Instead of selling, your radio and your TV and so on and so forth, you can just buy an iPad. And so it eliminates the actual desire or need that may not have been anticipated if you have not quantified KPIs with that department and figured out what are going to be the outside influences that's happening. We still do want to look at qualitative KPIs. We do want to have an understanding of what the learner can express, how they feel, what they have valued from what we've done, and how has that they feel is going to impact their ability going forward. We really do want to know that because later on we can ask them on that qualitative side, 6 months from now, that training you took 6 months ago, have you been able to apply it? Now that it's been 6 months, do you feel it's valuable? And now that 6 months have passed, what do you feel you don't remember or would really like to brush up on that information? So you also want to look at leading those KPIs, because what it'll do is if you can anticipate where you want to be with that KPI, it'll actually predict your future performance at the same time. I was telling you about that at the beginning, where over time, what'll end up happening is I can see the trend or where we actually fall within inside of the realm to put a mean based on the data. That way, I know this is where our middle ground is and where we want to achieve if we end up with any additional, which always happens, outside influences or variables that may impact that. So a great example of that is just because you get more traffic to your website, it may or may not provide more conversions. But when you're leading those KPIs, you can look at your mean and then take a percentage of your mean and determine on where you want to go with it. If you want to go up 10%, 15%, and then you can anticipate that future performance based on that existing web traffic that you may have now. Now, there's another lagging KPI. This is looking at past results. And this is what we get quite often when we jump in with a company, especially today. And what do I mean by that? There's many organizations that are migrating from instructor-led training or classroom training or even virtual classroom training to self-paced learning experiences. And so what we are looking at is how can we look at the lagging KPIs that they've had over those training experiences so that we can see how effective that has been and see the results from the past. One of the things we also can look at is like your attrition rate, your turnover rate, your drop off rate after 90 days to really figure out if your onboarding needs to be improved. And those types of things will help tremendously going forward to really have an understanding of where we're starting from. Also, there's input KPIs. These measure actually the time and the resources needed to finish the certain task or project. So we can look at if you're training on I don't know, a CNC machine, and it's taking you X amount of time to do it face to face. What we're able to do is take that, benchmark that, and then continue to implement training before the face to face on the floor CNC training, and see if we can reduce that on the floor CNC training, because that takes employees off of the line and the things that they're working on to be able to do that one-on-one, which means you're now paying double the cost to have somebody being doing the one-on-one training. And this also works looking at, let's say, your budgeting or the number of employees and your current burn rates of your company. Things like that would be input. And then you also have outputs. This may be looking at how effective you are at getting out a product, how effective you've been with customer service, how effective you've been at producing whatever product or service you offer, and seeing exactly what's happening when it is outputted and how we can benchmark from there. And there's also looking at processes. That's the in-between rate And that is the time between you're doing one process or another, or how effective you are with inside of that process, and if we can actually increase that based on implementing training, because time is money. So it could be the average production time to manufacture a product. It could be the production line. How quickly can you turn over the production line and re-engineer it? So the next thing that I want to go over, because I'm asked this, we are asked quite often. Well, what would you track for the KPI, especially since we're in this industry, and how do we integrate that into it? But before I do, I want to ask you guys a poll question. Do you, in your job role, feel confident in selecting the right KPIs for the company training that you've been working on lately? There's no wrong answer, everybody. And this is anonymous. If your boss is with you, just don't answer. Don't let them know what you answered. Do you feel you're confident in selecting the right KPIs? You guys are fast today. Well, I'll show you. You guys, this is awesome. You're on that somewhat confident, but at the same time, we could always drill down some more. And I don't blame you, because I'm going to tell you each and every time that I am actually looking at the right KPIs for both our organization and others. I really want to know all of the details, from internal, external, input, outputs, processes, so on and so forth. And you really have to wrap your head around all of it, not just what they gave you for training content, but you got to investigate even more and be as curious as a kitten, to be able to get that information as much as possible. And that comes down to doing more of the business analysis side than we've ever done in the L&D training realm. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through different industries and really talk a little bit about some of the baseline KPIs that we have seen in these industries. We'll talk, so first talk, start with the SaaS. Those SaaS companies, they look at their churn rate, their cost per acquisitions, their customer lifetime value, what the net promoter score is for them, their annual reoccurring revenue and monthly reoccurring revenue, based on them being a software as a service. That's extremely important KPIs their business is looking at across the board. Now, if you're in professional services, you may look at how many bookings and meetings have been created, what's your sales pipe look like, what's your revenue leakage, how many opportunities are you losing, how many scheduled and billable hours as a professional service company have you actually been able to bill for this year, and what's an effective and competitive billable rate, because that is vastly changing. As you guys know, we're going through the Great Resignation, and wages are increasing, and so we're now seeing a higher effective billable rate, not just for new in-house employees, but also freelancers, also the plumbers, the people that fix our roofs, so on and so forth. So wages are increasing, and that is something that has to be taken into consideration. Let's say you're online media, or you're in the publishing side. You're looking at how many unique visitors. You're looking at what is the share ratio of the information, how many impressions of that information, how many page views you may be looking for, and what is your referral and growth rates, and how much time is actually spent on the sites that you're providing that online media for. Now, what about retail? You may be looking at capital expenditures. Sales per square foot is extremely important, as you guys know. If you guys, anybody in here, work for an organization that may have products in a store, even like Walmart or Kroger or so on and so forth, that is extremely important to know how much you're getting sales per square foot, because they may bump you out if it's too low. Customer satisfaction, how often are these being purchased and repurchased, for the customer retention, and what is the average customer spend on those products over their lifetime of being a customer. And then what is your stock turnover? How quickly are you turning over that product and having to restock the shelves? Let's talk a little bit about automotive, one of my favorite industries. Your average downtime for your factories and your production side of things. That could be from logistics situations, that could be from uh, safety situations, that could be default issues with inside of the production lines. Your utilization rate, your accidents per employees. That's something that we also look at, especially when we're looking at safety training or training on machinery. What's your throughput, and how effective are you from beginning of the assembly all the way to that vehicle rolling off the line, and how quickly are you turning over specific inventory, and has that effectively been sourced and negotiated? And then we look at manufacturing. We have the overall equipment effectiveness based on the costs of that equipment over their lifetime, equipment downtime, and how often that is happening, and how much time is actually being taken by that downtime. Customer rejections, that may be from faulty product, that may be from overrun, that may be from miscalculation, something that may not be in the control of your organization. And then the lead time for customers. How quickly are we getting this material manufactured? I could tell you from my own personal notes for everybody, I'm in the middle of restoring a car, and it took 9 months to get the new seat covers, the new leather for the seat covers. And so there's a long lead time for things depending on what it is. And so let's look a little bit about the financial KPIs that we also see, cash flow ratios, what working capital do they have, what is the gross burn rate for the organization, what is the turnover on accounts payable, what is your invoicing processing cost or average invoicing cost, and how many days are you actually waiting on the outstanding payments. Our organization works with large corporations, and a lot of times they have anywhere from net 30 to net 180. And so depending on who you're working with, that net can really impact the payments or the financial side of an organization. So there are things you can look at on your company strategy. If there's differences when you're looking at startup versus an enterprise, and certain metrics that are more important than others. Early stage companies typically focus on data related to business model validation, while established organizations focus on the metrics like cost per acquisition and customer lifetime value. And so here are some of those performance indicators for companies at various stage growth. So you're looking at this, if they're looking at pre-product market fit, they'll look at qualitative feedback, customer interviews, awareness, and the stickiness of this potential product. While if they have a product and market fit, they may be looking at the revenue for monthly renewals, what's the churn rate, and how satisfied is the customer. And then if they're looking to expand the organization or product lines, they'll look at what their cost per acquisition is, their average order size, their lifetime value of that customers, and then the number of customers acquired over the over a specific time frame. So what do we do to really look at how do we evaluate if our KPIs, and how do we evaluate our training to make sure that we're doing this effectively? Okay. Well, first and foremost, I do want to say the Kirkpatrick model has been a baseline. It's actually really great. The Kirkpatricks have done an excellent job with this. You're looking at your level one, your reaction, finding out what is favorable. Then you have your level two, skills have been required. Your level three is how the behaviors have changed. Your level four is which targeted outcomes occur, and do we have any accountability for that? And then there's also the Kaufman's uh, 5 levels of evaluation. And basically, what this does is it takes the Kirkpatrick and splits the level one input and process into 2 sections. It's geared toward evaluating how training enhances customer and social satisfaction. It's usually using a 5-step model with the initial investment and how learners react to the training, what benefits for small and large groups and subsets, and then looking at the practical impact of training on employee productivity. And so we then also look at if that employee training adds value to the company and the culture or the society at large, and how can we quantify that at the same time. And then we also have the formative evaluation model. You can really create feedback loops with the formative evaluation model. It allows us to really do quite a few feedback loops on learning objectives, tools, design content, desired deliverables, desired outcomes. And so what you would do is actually do a visual objective setup, do a visual design to kind of get a better sense of what we're looking at, and then have an evaluation and focus groups there, then implement content, then do an evaluation, then revise, then do a delivery method, then do another evaluation, then design all of the additional activities, then do another evaluation, then conduct an assessment, and then do another evaluation. So it becomes something that may be tough to do if you're looking to utilize an outside vendor, but something you may be able to do in-house. And there was what I was talking about. So objectives, visual design, evaluation, content delivery, method evaluation, design activities, conduct assessments, and evaluation. Basically taking a lot of the same processes that we do now, but mixing it up to where we're looking at objectives and visual design right off the bat. Trying to get that in front of let's say, the customer or the organization. And then you have quite a few of those evaluation activities. And that evaluation may be group evaluation, stakeholder evaluation, learner evaluation, depending on who and what you're evaluating. And then there's the summative evaluation model. This is a lot of what you see. It's based on that ADDIE process, and it's design, development, implementation, and evaluation. It's just you're missing the analysis at the beginning to distinguish between the ADDIE and the summative. And one of the things that I can tell you is this: the summative evaluation model really works effectively if you are doing, let's say, rapid development, because you can jump right into designing, development, implementing, and then seeing how effective it is, and then repeating that. Then there's also the Phillips ROI methodology. Similar to the Kirkpatrick model, this has 5 levels. The first one, you evaluate the employee learner reaction and their satisfaction with the existing course material or with the existing information that you may have been provided that they need to look at. Then you're going to have a second step where you're actually doing a learning stage to determine how successful students were in gaining these new skills and knowledge. And then the third is in the assessment implementation stage, where you'll actually implement it and gauge during that whether whether this has improved workplace performance or not. Then you have your fourth stage. It's used to measure the business impacts, and then you'll compare those business impacts and outcomes to the training cost to calculate the expense versus the actual outcomes. One thing that we found is each one of these models is fantastic, and they actually are aligned quite together, and they are extremely effective, each one that you approach. And some of them are a mix between, the waterfall and the agile methodology. Some of them like to do the waterfall and the evaluation, or the waterfall and evaluation and focus group throughout that, to make that agile with inside of each one of the ADDIE steps. And we've seen everything in between. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we found has worked extremely well for the training evaluation model for us. So one of the things that I want to point out is, let me jump up, is we have first and foremost that reaction level where we're analyzing how the audience feels about the existing training, or what they actually feel is missing, and how they need to, what they want to have, and what they feel would be the most beneficial. Then we're actually benchmarking with them to say, what are they, how can we make sure that we're showing a learning impact? How can we try to make sure that we eliminate any variables that may impact our ability to track this ROI? And then we're looking at how well they're applying this information and identifying if they're performing the correct behaviors, and if that is happening over time. Then we're actually looking at the business results, which we benchmarked with them at the beginning to really determine on what has been effective for them so far, and based on that quantitative data that we've done in both the beginning and the post. We do a return on investment, where we do the financial return to show like this is what it costs, and this is what broken down it actually takes. But one of the other ones that we do that's extremely important is we do a return on equity. This is a quantifiable value where we can look at the training experience provided, and look at a holistic feedback from learners and data, and determine on what exactly has been generated as the investment and received from not just your organization, but the stakeholders and the learners. And to do so, we talked a little bit about this, but a lot of times what we've been doing is we have been developing out these web portals, and the web portals are the XAPI tracking material while these courses are still SCORM coded and sitting in your learning management system. That way, the actual course and the course simulation or whatever we decide to develop together is still housed in there, still shows that they complete, still uses all the SCORM coding, but now we can port that material out to either your own learning record store and set up the web charts and data for you, or we can provide that to you so that you can actually see that analytical data. So I do want to talk a little bit about those analytical dashboards, and each one of the training developments that we do, we actually provide a free analytical dashboard, because a lot of times when you're using an external vendor, you have the issue of having to prove our worth compared to, well, if we just did this in-house. And what you're looking at right here for everyone to take a look at is actually a project that we did with an undisclosed client, and it was in the aerospace and aerospace industry. And one of the things that we looked at are the 12 human impact factors that impact the safety and the productivity in the aerospace industry. And what you're looking at is you have an active and a beta version. The beta version in this video actually was the first time that they took it, and then the active version was the second time that I actually took it. And this was a randomized simulation, so each and every time they take it, it is unique, but they're put into all these different scenarios as they go through this simulated experience. And what we're able to do is actually track those competencies to determine on how effective they have been before, the first time they took it, and then the second time they took it. Now, they did not see the same scenarios and situations though. So that means this information vastly changed for them. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was still a scenario and situations over a lack of assertiveness, lack of awareness, compliancy or complacency, lack of communication. And so this actually is what you would see if you were a teacher in the classroom, and we're tracking it by competencies. And so we're not necessarily just putting everything that says Johnny clicked this, Johnny did this, Johnny hovered over this, Johnny took 2 minutes to do this one. Not only that, but we also have to take into consideration what's called PII, personal identification information. As a company that works with the federal government, I can tell you I do not want to know anything regarding PII with you. I want to know and count from a holistic and a macro level those competencies, so we can see either individuals by department, or we can see them in ways that do not allow us to see who they actually are. So looking at each one of your organizations, one of the things I'm going to do is put out a poll real quick. Based on some of the things I've said and the things that you're up against, could your company benefit from these analytical KPI dashboards today? Just curious of what you think. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, and I do not know who has voted what. So just thinking out loud of what may be beneficial or not. Give you a minute or two. just think about it. If you were to have these for the things that you're working on, would these be beneficial for you? All right. I'm going to publish the results. Anyone else voting? Three, two, one, and there we go. I love to see that you guys are already using it, and I love to see that you want to implement it, because what you're trying to do is really see how I can promote this and justify what I'm doing, because you guys are constantly fighting the uphill battle. You don't want to know what the uphill battle is. The fact that sales and marketing gets all the funds, and then whatever's left over, we're fighting the human resources department for, and we're just grabbing crumbs, and it's can be disheartening at times. But if we can show our worth analytically, we're more likely going to start getting bigger budgets. So how do we make that happen? One of the things I do want to show you is, if you are deciding like, hey, we really would like to look at the possibility of implementing an LRS, that's great. You can purchase an LRS right now from one of the LRS companies. But the biggest thing is you still have to go in and program and have it do what you need to do in each one of the course developments that you've done. You need to be able to make sure that it's going to pass all the security setups and systems, so you can cross push data. You're going to have to troubleshoot that material. You're going to have to redo quite a few of the courses if you have them already. And that takes time and assistance. Not only that, but one of the other bigger things that we're finding is there are many companies that want an on-premise LRS. So we've been working with them to install those on-premise pieces, so that they can actually have that data. And then they're using it more. They're using it not just for the online courses, but they're using the LRS in many different other aspects, tracking what documents have been opening, putting XAPI statements in the PDF to see what they've been accessing, things like that, so that they have a more holistic view of what's being accessed and when. So we are able to help on that partner success model, guys. The one thing that we would do is look at that consultation side, because to me, just like anyone else that's here that comes from the L&D side, you really have to do this diagnostic. I've never walked into a doctor's office and that doctor just look at me and say, "Oh, here's some penicillin. See ya." No, we have been interrogated all the way down to figuring out what could be the root cause. And then from there, the root cause is then evaluated and determined on an approach to helping eliminate some of that root cause. And so to do so, each one of these analysis we're able to assist with. And then also the outputs of those. So if you do decide to implement an LRS and you do need some help recoding, or at least building one out so you have a firm understanding, we're able to assist that with that also. And then one other thing that we're able to do is actually assist with the support side of things. So if you do decide to set this up and you do need support to have your in-house team kind of take it over, we'll help with that also. And to do so, we actually follow a mix between each one of those process models that I was showing you before, where we're running both waterfall and agile. We're running a full ADDIE process. And one of the things that we really do is, remember I was talking about the pixel dust, everyone? We make sure that that is not the case. We are looking at these solutions for online training as living, breathing experiences that should evolve over time and should have a longer shelf life than just one or two multiple choices or one or two paths to take. They otherwise, we're now at the days of linear training. Modules are becoming obsolete. In my opinion, should have been obsolete 5 years ago. Now, not only that, guys, but we're now competing with YouTube. And what do I mean by that? Before COVID, we were in a situation where we could, in essence, limit and control the environment, even if they were doing it online, that our employees had when taking our training, so that we could have a lot more of their attention. Now, many of us are working from home. We have kids, we have dogs. We are driving around like crazy. And we now have 15 different tabs. I can guarantee you, and I will bet everyone $100 right now that you have at least 3 tabs open on your computer, not including this one. And the reason why is human beings are limited in attention spans, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And because of that, we are now, thanks for the laugh, because it's scary to know that I psychologically understand that's what's actually happening. Um, and so we're now in the age of complete reactionary, complete instant gratification. We're now in the age of just instant gratification. So we now have an attention spans that are worse than they were 30 years ago. And it's going to continue as we continue to get bombarded by content. So you guys that are building training are now in a situation where you are now competing with every content developer in the world. That means all those YouTube people like PewDiePie and Ryan's World and Blippi are now your competition, because you are now competing for the attention across the entire internet, not just the controlled amount while they're at work. And I talked a little bit about let me just jump down here. We are in situations where we're quite often asked to do that XAPI tracking, especially on higher end builds. Take into consideration that you can actually do XAPI and VR experiences too, everybody. This is actually a warehouse training simulation where we used Dialogflow, that is artificial intelligence, talking non-playing characters, but you're actually doing a warehouse inspection, and the entire time that you do an inspection, the things that you do and how you do them are actually being tracked so that we can have an XAPI dashboard. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in the learning management system. You can use XAPI and use this analytical material for VR experiences, for mobile app builds, for just PDFs, Word documents, so on and so forth. So it's not just limited to an e-learning module. The only caveat about that is you still have to do programming. And sadly, we, in our industry of learning and development, we went from in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, from having a developer and an instructional designer to us getting products like Storyline and Captivate that now have somewhat eliminated the programmer and allowed us to do a lot of the stuff user friendly. So a lot of instructional designers were picking up the development. And now what's happening is we have to go back to coding now that we're in HTML5 and JavaScript, and also analytics that have to be custom coded. So I think it's a little bit of an irony. Not only that, but when I started doing e-learning development, it was at GE's turbine engine plant, and we were building in JavaScript and HTML5. That was back when AuthorAware was around, or not HTML5. I'm sorry, JavaScript and just CSS and HTML. And then I think it's ironic that cut to, I don't know, 20 years later, we're back to HTML and JavaScript as our primary build tools. I was just talking about this. You can do mobile app sides. I've seen augmented reality builds in which you can track XAPI. Another really cool thing that I've seen is you can actually suspend the data with XAPI. So let's say you're in an area where there's a very rural area and you do not have internet connection, yet you provide, let's say, a self-pay module on a USB or a DVD. You can actually, once it does access the internet, it will port that data immediately and then tell you that this is the date that it was actually taken and done, and this is the outcomes that actually took place. But this is when we actually received it, so that we can actually determine on how and why and when we got that information, so that we can manipulate and put it the way that we need to. Now, I want to let you guys know that also goes for any types of builds that you do. You are able to do this with serious games. You're able to do it with simulations. It really comes down to aligning your objectives and aligning those objectives to the business needs. And then from there, quantifying both the business needs, the objectives internally and externally, and being able to really have a strong foundation of the business side, because 9 times out of 10 they're coming at you reactionary. freaking out because they need training on this because something bad may have happened. That's not all the time, obviously, but it is quite often the reality for most L&D people. Now, if not, I envy you because that sometimes can be pretty tough to handle if you're are pretty awesome to be in that type of environment, but many of us are not. So now that we're down to the last minute, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about the next steps. We are going to provide this as a recording to the individuals that came today, just in case you want to recycle back through. But we have not released an ebook on this yet. So you guys are going to be the first ones to get our ebook to take with you as a follow-up guide when looking at this information and what could work for you. And then not only that, we'll be able to schedule a meeting to discuss your training goals and discuss how you could implement it. What are the best practices? What are the best solutions? Right now, I do not promote any LRS, but I know of the majority of them. And we've been practicing in quite a few of them. It's just it comes down to the needs of the business to determine on which one would be the best option. And on top of that, I do want to say, if you would like to book through me, I will put the URL in the Q&A, and you guys can take a shout out to there. Otherwise, we'll send it in an email to you guys. That way, you have that information and can get a hold of us, me, so that we can nerd it up. And I do want to say thank you guys so very, very much. If you could just take 1 second before you guys leave and rate the webinar for us. I just put it up as a poll. And I just want to say thank you. I know there was a lot of information, but I just feel that we always talk about ADDIE and only ADDIE, and we talk about what a KPI is, but I wanted to bridge the business side and the learning side. So I hope I was able to help you guys on that. And if you guys do need more assistance or want to talk more, just nerd it up with me. I am always around. It's andrew.hughes at Designing Digitally, or you can find me again on LinkedIn. And if you want to add me to LinkedIn, I'll pop up that page for you right now. Or right here is my information, andrew.hughes at contactddinc.com. And then you can call me at 513-698-8142. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thank you so very, very much for your time today. I hope each one of you now feels a little more nerdier about how to do some of that tracking and measuring and evaluating. If you want to drill down on it, again, just get a hold of me. And until we speak again, stay creative.